Today's the moderator of this panel, Daniel Kurtz-Phelan, is the editor of Foreign Affairs, author of the book The China Mission, former U.S. State Department official, including a member of the Secretary of the State Policy Planning Staff. Please, Daniel. Daniel will have the conversation with Dmytro Kuleba, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, that will join us online.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Thanks to everyone at Ukraine House and supporters for bringing us together. It's very nice to see everyone. I'm Dan Kurtz-Phelan. I'm the editor of Foreign Affairs magazine, and really pleased to be doing this conversation. I will spend the first chunk of time asking questions of the foreign minister, and then we'll have a little bit of time at the end for questions from all of you. So please keep those in mind as we go, and I'll try to get to as many people as possible as we get towards the end of this session. Is the foreign minister ready? Are we waiting on him? He is. Okay, there. Is it possible to see him on that screen as well? Can we change? Okay. Foreign Minister, very nice to see you again. Thank you so much for doing this. I realize it comes in the wake of the terrible tragedy with your colleagues yesterday, and of course, after the end of so much tragedy and brutality over the course of the last year, as well as so much resourcefulness and resilience on the part of you and your colleagues and the Ukrainian people. So really pleased to be having this conversation as we approach the one-year mark of the February 24th invasion. I'd like to start with a fairly broad question, really just to get your sense of where things stand in the war. I think when you have these discussions in the West, we talk about a grinding conflict, perhaps a stalemate. You have others who more pessimistically predict a Russian counteroffensive in the coming weeks that could test Ukrainian forces once again. Where do you see things? How should we understand where things are in the battlefield?
Thank you, Daniel. It's good to see
Ukraine.
Hi to everyone present in the room. I hope you can hear me. Daniel, can you?
Yes. Just 1 second. There's another video playing, which we'll turn off. Okay. We're good. Okay, just a second. We've lost sound.
I think we have a sound issue.
There we
right?
go. Okay. Could you hear my question, Foreign Minister?
I didn't hear everything that you said because it was kind of broken, but I hope the technicians will fix it, and I will answer your question intuitively. Okay. But first of all, I would like to thank you for your kind words of condolences. This is the first time since the beginning of the war that I lost someone whom I really respected and loved as a person. And I had known Yevhen Yenin for many years, and he was my deputy. And Denis Monastyrsky, the interior minister, was a very good man, and both of them were very efficient managers in times of war. So thank you for your kind words. I wish I could be with you today in person, but I would say military, not entirely diplomatic agenda kept me in Kiev, because since 2nd of January, President Zelensky has had a true marathon of international calls with his counterparts all across the world. And you see that decisions on the delivery of new weapons to Ukraine. Some of them were on the waiting list for many months. They are coming every day. But to achieve that, you really have to focus on this. And the only reason why I'm not with you today is because I had to stay in Kiev and be personally engaged and coordinate our efforts to mobilize as much military assistance and support as we can within the shortest period of time possible. President is dedicating a lot of time to it. Minister of Defense, myself, other officials, we are all working hard on it, because We understand how important this year is. We understand what Russia's intentions are, and we have to be ready for the Russian attempt to win on the battlefield. We should not allow that to happen. But having said this, our goals, our aims in the war, they remain unchanged. Full restoration of the territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders. When I'm asked when will I uncork a bottle of champagne to victory of Ukraine, my answer is very simple: when the last square inch of Ukrainian soil returns under Ukrainian control. Of course, many other aims will follow: justice, reparations, recovery, ensuring that Russia does not repeat its aggression. This is another big challenge that we are going to face. But in a nutshell, restoring control over all of our land is the basic victory. Without this, nothing else will be genuinely possible. And we appreciate those countries who stand by us in this exercise, in pursuing this aim. We know that some are still cannot identify what the victory of Ukraine will look like for them, but we are working. We are working on streamlining these perceptions, these attitudes. And the good news is that I'm not aware of any country who stands by Ukraine in this struggle and who does not believe that Ukraine must restore its territorial integrity as a result of the war. And often journalists, when they ask me a similar question like you did, they always add this, including Crimea, when I speak about territorial restoration of territorial integrity. And my media advisor, upon my request, is now asking journalists who are preparing for an interview with me not to make that point, because when a journalist adds this, including Crimea, or when a politician does that, he unwillingly reinforces the Russian narrative that Crimea is something special, that there is a territory of Ukraine and then there is Crimea. And we shouldn't do that. We should have a very simple approach. Crimea is no different to Kherson, Donetsk, Lugansk, Kharkiv, Kiev, or any other city of Ukraine. This is all Ukrainian, and every piece of our land should be returned under our control. So there is no sense in specifying anything in that regard. There is no such thing as including Crimea. There is a very simple thing: including every square inch of Ukrainian territory.
Well, thank you for that setup. It's a really nice introduction to this conversation. I'm grateful to say I was not going to ask what about Crimea as a follow-up, so I don't have to cross it off my list. But I want to get into a little bit more detail on the dynamic around Western military assistance. I think we've seen this pattern since early in the war, in which Ukraine asks for certain kinds of weapon systems, certain kinds of capabilities. Western governments, including the US and many European governments, resist or say it's not possible or it's too escalatory or too aggressive at the beginning, and then you and your colleagues eventually bring them around. I think when I last saw you here, we were talking about HIMARS, Patriots. Now we're talking about tanks and tactical air missiles, ATACMS. When you have these conversations with officials in the United States and Europe, what are the concerns you hear from them about giving Ukraine certain capabilities, and what do you say in response when you hear concerns about provocation or whatever else?
Most of the conversations on weapons we've had since the beginning of the war began with a no. No coming from the potential country of supply. Not all of these conversations, I have to be fair, but almost all of them, especially when it comes to the most sophisticated state-of-the-art arms. yes, it takes time. Yes, we wish it didn't take that much time for partners to make these decisions. But in the end, we're getting everything that we asked for. Except two big issues, two big options, which are not unlocked yet in principle. And those are Western fighting jets and long-range missiles. Everything else is unlocked one way or another. Just a couple of hours ago, Sweden announced that they will be providing Archer, the state-of-the-art self-propelled howitzer. This is the weapon that I remember going to Sweden and sitting down with both the government and the opposition and arguing why it would be of utmost importance and it would be greatly appreciated by us if we could receive this, one of the best howitzers in the world, to strengthen our firing capability at the front line. And yes, I did not come from Sweden with a result, because the answer I heard from then officials was, no, this is not the time. But now, 3 or 4 months later, the decision is there. And yes, it took many conversations. It took a change of government in Sweden. It took personal involvement of President Zelensky, of myself, of Ministry of Defense. But in the end, we have it. And this is a big news. This is really important. Another big story is on tanks. The option on tanks is unlocked in principle, thanks to France and the United Kingdom, and the commitment of Poland to provide German tanks. But of course, the option will be fully unlocked when Germany gives green light to those third countries who are willing to provide their Leopards to us, and when Germany decides itself to provide us with these tanks. But I consider the tank option unlocked, and there was a lot of campaigning and advocacy, and our Ukrainians living abroad, our diaspora was also involved in that. I mean, this was a really big effort. So, judging from the announcements which we're hearing since the very first days of this year, I see that the commitment to provide with Ukraine with all necessary weapons is even stronger than it was last year. We have, it took us 2 years to campaign for Patriots, and it took us slightly less than a month to receive 3 batteries of Patriots from the United States, Germany, and the Netherlands. And we are working on more. And I'm sure that we will have more, because we are pretty advanced in a couple of conversations on that. So we see how things speed up. And this is exactly what the point that my president was making yesterday at Davos, that all the decisions you are making, they're good ones, but you have to speed them up. And when we unlock both long-range missiles and planes, which I'm also certain will happen one day, our list of most wanted weapons will be complete. We may think of aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines, but this is not on the agenda yet. I'm joking.
Let me ask two quick follow-up questions to that. Do you expect a decision on Leopards will come in the coming days, whether that's Friday in the defense meeting or subsequently? And then second, what do you think accounts for that delay? And when you have conversations with your counterparts, how do you try to speed them up? How do you try to move these decisions more quickly?
I didn't capture the first part of your question. If you could repeat it.
Do you think you'll get Leopards?
Yeah, okay. Listen, it takes time, and you have to talk. And you have to talk at different levels with partners. And if there is one rule that you have to follow in these conversations throughout the whole timeline, it's that you have to be honest and frank. Because when they make decisions on providing you with certain types of weapons, in most of the cases, they take it from their stock. And that takes, a commitment and also responsibility to do that. Because stocks are not being immediately refilled with the new stuff. So there must be trust between you and your partner. And to build that trust, you have to always be honest and to describe things as they are. Never over-dramatize, but also never underestimate. And I think what made all of these decisions that we've been hearing about since President Zelensky's visit to Washington are two things. First, it's a kind of a cumulative effect of all of the work that was previously done. And then one day, you hit the wall, one hit after another. You see how it gets crashed piece by piece. But the day comes when you make the final hit and the wall falls apart. And this is the result of this work. But also, I think it was important to hear. It was important for our partners to hear a very strong and continued commitment of the United States to continue providing Ukraine with support as long as it takes for Ukraine to win. And that message that penetrated the world and was so square and clear during the visit of President Zelensky to Washington made many capitals speed up their decision-making process. And on Leopards, listen, I have commented it on this so many times, and I will be very short. There is not a single reasonable argument why Germany shouldn't do it. We've been through this. We understand how it works. We understand the strategy of Germany to align with the United States. They will do it. It's just a matter of time. Our job is to make it happen rather sooner than later. I think we will succeed. And I, in advance, thank Chancellor Scholz for making this decision whenever he is to make it. But first step is to give green light to those already willing to provide Leopards which are in their possession. The list of these countries is, takes more than two hands to count. So there are plenty of them. Yes, we hear the argument that from the federal government that these countries have not approached the federal government with a permission. But come on, we are all real people and we live in the real world. They will approach Germany when they know that Germany will give green light and that they will not be rejected. So Germany has to signal to them that time has come. In short, we need tanks. We need tanks. Without tanks, it will be extremely difficult to move forward and to liberate our territories, because Russia's firing power is still strong, and some big battles are ahead of us. And to win in big battles, we need big weapons.
I will not ask you to talk about frustration or anger you may feel. I will just say it is remarkable how much patience and grace and calmness and fortitude in the conversations about delays you have shown over the last year. I want to talk about U.S. politics for just a second. As you, of course, know well, there are House Republicans who have made noises about being a little bit more restrictive about assistance to Ukraine, to say nothing of just the slightly insane structure of the Republican caucus right now and what that might mean for doing anything in the U.S. Congress. Are you worried about the ability of the United States to sustain assistance for Ukraine in the months ahead, just given the state of the politics?
Since the beginning of the war, I worry only for two things: for the safety of my kids and my parents during air raids, and for the safety of the personnel of the foreign ministry during the same moments. I literally walk through the floors of the ministry and and instruct everyone to go down to the shelter. I have no right, neither moral nor professional, to be worried about anything else during the war. But for my family and for the people I'm in charge of, there are challenges, there are problems. Yes, there are risks. Yes, it's our job to face challenges, to turn risks into opportunities, and I'm sure that we will succeed in that. We have shown many times that over the past years that we kind of possess this skill of doing it. So, as you rightly said, yes, there will be. I expect more comments and statements coming from a part of a Republican Party. And these comments and statements and moves, and probably even political moves, will make noise and will ignite public opinion, probably. But I think that the overall bipartisan support that Ukraine enjoys in the United States, in both Democratic and Republican parties, is rock solid. And we will overcome these challenges. We will turn risks into opportunities together, because when we act jointly, we always succeed.
So I want to talk about Crimea, though I promise this is not the "What about Crimea" section of my questions. But I do want to get your reaction to the views you hear from senior officials in U.S. and European governments. Their assessment is that if Ukrainian forces really were threatening to get the Russians out of Crimea, that there'd be a serious risk of escalation, including nuclear use. I know that the typical reaction from Ukrainian officials is, so what, that's not going to stop us or scare us. But there is a kind of legitimate argument that nuclear blackmail is something you should pay attention to. Do you find that the Americans and Europeans you talk to are too afraid of escalation?
Well, not that much. I think what our colleagues have to accept is a very simple rule, that while considering any decision related to supporting Ukraine in this war launched by Russia, fear should not be a factor that impacts the decision-making process. And because if we follow the logic of fears, then of course we have to lay our hands down, sit and wait until Russia completes its job. And yes, there are some fears that I'm hearing, like, we shouldn't push Russia too far, or we shouldn't do this in order not to escalate, to make Russia escalate. But I've seen in this 11 months of the war how our partners are effectively learning how to work with their fears. They are improving. And we see how one fear falls apart after another. I mean, is put aside, is sidelined one after another. And yes, the thing about nuclear war is will always be an argument that makes everyone feel scared. But this was exactly the same discussion during the existence of the Soviet Union. And the same arguments were being made. And the famous Chicken Kiev speech in Kiev, delivered in Kiev by U.S. President, urging Ukrainians not to embrace nationalism and to support Gorby in his attempts to keep the Soviet Union alive, is just an example of how big mistakes can be if you allow your strategic thinking to be based on fears. In the end, Ukraine became independent, Soviet Union fell apart. The US, United States with Russia effectively deprived us of nuclear weapons as a result of their joint operation. No nuclear weapon was used. So none of these fears came to be true. And there are some other examples which can be quoted on this on the issue of nuclear deterrence strategy. So my point is simple: if you succeeded in deterring Soviet nuclear threat, then probably there are good reasons to believe that the same countries will succeed in deterring Russian nuclear threat. And if you remove this element from the conversation, then this is the really kind of last big argument in favor of considering Crimea as a special case, which is not.
I want to talk about your diplomatic efforts on two other important fronts. First, China. What have your conversations with your Chinese counterparts been like? Have you seen any movement in their position, whether on restraining Russia or on supporting Ukraine? And what would you like to see from China as you have those conversations?
Yes, 2022 was the year of renaissance in the Ukraine-Africa relations. We also made good progress on Asian track, but if you ask me to compare, I think we made more progress in Africa than in Asia. That's to be fair in the assessment. And I think this will be the overall trend. The more we will be investing in our relations, the more progress we will be making. But in terms of progress being made, I think Africa will be, ahead of Asia, for many reasons. This issue really deserves a separate conversation. But we will be heavily investing our scarce resources in Africa this year. President Zelensky already supported our proposal, the proposal of the Foreign Ministry, to open 10 new embassies in Africa. We will be testing, the format of very efficient small embassy, but we will do that. We will make that happen. We are working. Last year, President launched the initiative called Grain from Ukraine, where for the first time ever, we provided a platform to bring together donors, to connect donors who want to help Africa and Asian countries to address the issue of food shortage and famine and Ukrainian grain. And it was a perfect match. So despite all the difficulties in Russian blockade, we are shipping grain to Africa and to Asia to help countries who need it the most. So yes, you will hear more news about Ukraine's engagement with Global South this year. Though I must tell you, I think that in the broadest terms, coalitions have been formed. So I don't expect any big dramatic changes in the current balance until the end of the war. Of course, the more successful Ukraine will be, the more outspoken and eloquent those countries who remain silent or who speak with us, who whisper something into our ear, but do not dare to speak out loudly. But in principle, this is the balance that we are seeing. It will stay until the end of the war. In the end, of course, after we win the war, almost everyone will be telling us that they were with us since day one.
And does that mean that you see little hope of bringing China around to your position, or at least to get them to do more to restrain Putin? Is there anything you would like them to do that you think they might do?
Yeah, China is a special case, and we have to be careful in the assessment of Chinese position, not because we are afraid of saying something, but because it is so nuanced that it's important not to send a wrong signal about where China stands. So when we see that China is not helping Russia to circumvent sanctions, and we know that the Russians asked the Chinese to help them, that's a good thing. When China does not help Russia on the military front, I mean, by providing the military equipment, that's good. That's good thing. When we hear assessment delivered by some Chinese officials of the origins and the reasons why this Russian aggression is taking place, we don't feel happy. But all in all, we have to continue to engage with China, which I think will be very careful in amending or fine-tuning its position. But I think that under current circumstances, the most important thing is that Russia does not benefit from the Chinese position. This is a good kind of starter for the conversation, which we are keen to pursue with Beijing.
That was a very nuanced answer, so you delivered on that objective. I want to talk a bit about where this ends. And the one thing you do often hear from U.S. officials, they say, we want to support Ukraine into the end, but we expect this war to end with negotiations. Do you disagree with that assessment? Do you have conversations with your American and European counterparts about negotiations? And then, you have talked about an international peace conference as one potential formula. How do you see that fitting into this dynamic?
Well, I believe that in terms of foreign policy decision-making process, two important principles have to be put in the kind of foundation of everything that is happening. When the war began, the first messages foreign leaders were sending out was that Ukraine must not lose, or Russia must not win. But these negative goals or negative frameworks, they never deliver results. So we started saying, guys, change the narrative, change the goal. The goal must be as simple as Ukraine must win. If you accept this as a starting point, then that will have a direct impact on your foreign policy, on the decisions that you will be making. And I'm happy to kind of establish the fact that all our key partners, they accepted it. They accepted this approach. They modified their narrative. They want Ukraine to win, which brings us to the next conversation, how victory should look like, and so on and so on. But the starting point gives you the right direction in the decision-making process. And that's really important. This is really an achievement. The second is, of course, the second principle is, when should peace talks begin, and what should they look like? And we have answers we heard very clear answers from all of our key allies, which was, it's up for Ukraine to decide when negotiations should begin. It's also a very important starting point, and we appreciate partners saying it and making it kind of a cornerstone of their position. And the answer to the second question, how it should look like, can be found in the peace formula proposed by President Zelensky. 10 steps, if implemented in a comprehensive way, will cover all major issues related to the Russian, to how to end, how these peace talks should end. And this is why we call on all countries to support peace formula proposed by President Zelensky. And by the way, coming back to your previous question, we designed it in a way that would make this formula as appealing as possible to the countries of the global south. So we designed it in a flexible way that allows you to participate in the formula without undertaking commitments, additional commitments, which you are not ready to take for national security concerns. So this is our big story now, peace formula, and we are working hard on making it a success because there is no other country in the world who wants peace more than Ukraine.
I'm going to ask a couple more questions, and then we'll open it to the floor to get a couple of questions in. As you, of course, know, Henry Kissinger surprised people here a couple days ago by saying he thought it would be appropriate to bring Ukraine into NATO in the wake of this war, which was a notable change in his position. Your government has, I believe, in the past said it's willing to accept security guarantees short of NATO membership. Is that still the case, and what would those security guarantees look like?
Well, I have to begin by saying that I envy Henry Kissinger. I hope that when I turn 90-something, I will still be able to surprise people around the world with my thoughts and ideas and proposals. I think Henry Kissinger. I don't want to cause another scandal, but I think Henry Kissinger is often misinterpreted by the Ukrainian public opinion, because he's just the man who makes proposals which he believes are rational under certain circumstances. So he never hypothesizes. And when he sees that circumstances change, he changes his proposals, which I think a very strong feature of a politician and of a man, not to stick to obsolete concepts and ideas, but to evolve as reality on the ground evolves. And that's exactly what we saw in his latest statement. And it's a good message because, yes, many people across the world misread Kissinger and many intellectuals, and for them he is also kind of a beacon of ultra-rational thinking. So if Kissinger says that Ukraine can be a member of NATO, that will have a direct impact on many people who are reflecting on this issue across the world. And yes, of course, if the situation change, if circumstances change again, Kissinger will change his position and will cause another fierce and heated discussion in public and expert realms. But for the time being, what he says reflects reality on the ground, and that reality is there is no rational arguments anymore against Ukraine becoming member of NATO. Decision has to be made. It's a strategic decision, so definitely countries will take time. But this is the case when an intellectual is kind of going ahead of politicians. And it's important that these words were said by an intellectual with vast political experience. As regards Ukraine, yes, we want NATO. We want NATO membership. It's on the agenda. And the idea of security guarantees does not contradict that, because the question that security guarantees are supposed to cover is what are the security guarantees for Ukraine between now and the moment it becomes a member of NATO. But that does not cancel the idea that we are pursuing NATO membership and we are moving in that direction.
One more question from me, and then I'll go to everyone else in the room. You talked about the U.S. and European governments learning lessons. You've apparently been a very effective teacher in conveying those lessons to them. There are also a number of small countries with, threatening neighbors of their own who are trying to learn lessons from Ukraine's performance over the last year. When you look at Taiwan, for example, what do you think the lessons of the Ukrainian experience are for others that are trying to stand up against similar threats?
Well, I've been of this opinion for many years, even before the war. I think the only big lesson that Ukraine can teach the world is how to never give up in the struggle for freedom. This is what our history is all about. We never give up, and we survive throughout centuries, fighting against different oppressors and invaders. And this is the real big thing. If I break this big story, a big lesson into smaller ones, of course, there are many other things: how to be resilient, how to be cyber effective, how to rally the world in your support using diplomacy, how to do diplomacy without being diplomatic. There are many, many lessons which can be taught. But the main lesson is never give up in the fight for freedom.
I will resist the temptation to keep going and go to a couple of questions. Please keep your questions crisp and make them questions so that we can get to a couple. We'll start right here. There's a mic coming.
Okay, my name is Stephen Hartung. I'm an energy expert. And my question is, you talked quite a lot about military support or help from Germany. I'm from Germany. But are you open for also help for energy support? So your energy grid, your central energy grid is very dependent from power plants, but with decentralized power stations like photovoltaics and wind parks, you get a decentralized grid. And do you need help in this transformation? We would like to help you from the Germans to the Ukrainians. And if yes, I can leave my contact details here. What's your opinion about that?
Yes.
Straightforward.
That would be my short answer. Germany is indispensable in building not only the future of Ukrainian energy system, but also in building the future of the European energy system. And we see that future as our common one, because Ukraine will be a member of the European Union. Ukraine's energy will be governed by the same rules, and our energy systems should function as one. And I think this new energy system of Ukraine will be built on the premise of climate neutral energy. We will be striving for that goal. That's our ambition. Of course, we will keep nuclear stations for the time being, but everything else is something that we can turn into green. And the supply of hydrogen from Ukraine to first and foremost German market will be the bond that will connect our economies and our energy system. So there are many things to discuss. Pass on your cell phone. I don't know how you're going to do it, but I'm sure you will find a way.
Yes. Here.
Minister Kuleba, we love when you do your foreign trips and your famous line on you came here with 3 agenda items, weapons, weapons, weapons. And last year in Davos, you said you came here with 4 letters, ASAP. So at this year's Davos, what is your crisp ask?
No, that was complicated. Now, my word for Davos this year is victory. We are literally, physically, psychologically obsessed with this word for 2023. A wise man once told me that thoughts materialize. And it's hard to imagine how much we want this thought of victory to materialize. And the reason, as I said in the beginning, the reason I couldn't come to Davos this year is because I personally, as part of a broader team, work day and night on one thing, on victory. And to win, we need weapons, we need political cohesion and political kind of synchronization of all parties involved in this, in pursuing the same goal. And we have to sort many other issues, including the energy one, to keep the country running while we are fighting for the victory. So I'm sorry for not being with you in person, but this is the result of my obsession with the idea of victory.
Got a question there.
Hi, John de Blasio from Chicago, United States. I had a question about your view on how to preempt potential problems with the U.S. Congress. Given the change in the U.S. Congress, do you not think that getting ahead of some of the potential problems that they may cause, looking into corruption, governance issues in Ukraine, may be wise? In other words, look at a war on change of corruption and reform in the judicial, reform in Ukraine at the same time to address those concerns?
Listen, I think that it's close to impossible to find a country in the world that is fighting a war and is doing reforms at the same time. And this is what is happening in Ukraine. And most recently, we passed legislation which is directly linked to our effort to integrate into the European Union, but which makes our system of governance more transparent, more efficient, and also addresses the issues of the inherited issues of corruption. So I always have the same, when people, not you, but when politicians raise their hands and try to revive the old narrative about corruption and the lack of transparency in Ukraine and how bad things are and where our money are going and why we should be doing that, my answer is always very simple. Come and see everything with your own eyes. We will give you all the presentations about, and we will fully expose ourselves. We'll show you how it works, how we monitor the use of weapons or money which are being given to us to support us in this struggle. So instead of engaging in endless discussions, if politician is making that point in a sincere way and not as an excuse to kill the support given to Ukraine, then that politician should come to Ukraine and see everything with his or her own eyes. And all of these people are most welcome, irrespective of their nationality or political affiliation.
Is there one last question in the crowd? Here.
Yulia Badardinova, McDonald's. I would like to thank you, first of all, for all you're doing. I think that it's an amazing job, and as a person from operational business, I think that the execution that the ministry is doing, and your team and your leadership, especially in the beginning of the war, is amazing. We discussed yesterday here that we should start working for the future right now, and we should actually start investing right now, not waiting for the victory. And I wanted to ask you, what do you think? How do you think the agenda will be changing, and what are your narratives for the future of the diplomacy? Because we are building now very strong foundations in relationship with the countries. But what will be after the victory? How the narratives will change? How our embassies will become more builders of the cultural image of Ukraine? How do you see these things?
First of all, I would like to thank McDonald's for coming back to Ukraine. I'm never tired. I never get tired of emphasizing that I'm not your client, but my children are. But your return to Ukraine was such an important signal to global companies across the world that Ukraine is the place where you can and should work even despite the war. In particular, the opening of your restaurant in Bucha was a very strong message. So this is really something that sends a clear signal across the board about the need, about the feasibility and the importance of working in Ukraine here and now, and not to wait for the moment when the war ends. Speaking about the future of diplomacy, of Ukrainian diplomacy and Ukrainian embassies, I think we are pretty good at cultural front. This is not exactly the most kind of crisis field that I think needs to be addressed. We were very bad in 2014, but a lot has changed since then, and we are pretty efficient on that track. In fact, what I'm doing every week is I dedicate part of my time to discussing with colleagues, identifying problems and resolving them, how to build up the capacity of our businesses to work, of our embassies to work with businesses, how to promote Ukrainian export abroad, how to bring new investors into Ukraine. We set up a special online format for that, platform for that called Nazovny. We are digitalizing the relationship. It's kind of a CRM thing. We are digitalizing the relationship between the embassy and the exporter. We make everything transparent. So this is one of the fields that despite the war, always find time to work on, because I understand the importance of this for the future of Ukraine. And to build a building tomorrow, we have to lay the foundation of that today. And in a broader sense, yes, we are running out of time, but already now, but especially after the victory, Ukraine will have to learn by doing how to use some of the new features which were unlocked for it in the world, in the global affairs. The perception of Ukraine is completely different, and finally we took the right place on the world map of perception, the world map of perceptions. Economic opportunities will be absolutely sensational. We will have to learn how to project our defense capabilities to the world, because weapons of victory are always enjoy high demand on the market. Ukrainian weapons of victory, of course. There are many issues, political, economic, cultural, that will have to be addressed in a way that we never dealt with before, because we never had these opportunities in global affairs. So there is a lot to learn, and we have to learn now in order to be ready for the moment when victory comes.
Foreign Minister Kuleba, you've already established yourself as one of the great diplomats of our time. As a former diplomat, I'm very gratified to see diplomacy used to such great effect. Thank you for joining us amid everything, and I will look forward to seeing you in person, and I hope happier times. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you, everyone. Thank you for questions, but first of all, thank you for being with Ukraine. You are not making a mistake. This is one of the best things you ever did in your life. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Daniel. And let's all together, wish, and all of the wishes will definitely come true, because we do believe in the victory. And so in Davos, there is a great concentration of people. So we are joining you, the Minister, and definitely the victory will come. We have no doubt. Thank you for being with us. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.
So the next panel will start in 30 minutes. It will be on the rebuilding of the city. So please warm up with a great coffee downstairs, and we are waiting for you at 1:30 here. Thank you.